Right, let's take a look at this question, which is a question for psychopathology, having a look at explaining phobias. So a young woman says, when I was 5 years old, I was at a party and a balloon burst with a loud bang in my face. Even after all these years, I cannot bear to go into a room where there are balloons. They terrify me and I have to leave the room. Discuss the two-process model explanation of phobias. Refer to the above in your answer. So, the key things that are coming out here for me. So we've got discuss, which means that I have to describe and evaluate, and refer to the above, which shows that I have to apply. So it's asking me to do quite a lot in this question. I'm describing, I'm evaluating, I'm applying, and it's the two-process model, so there's actually quite a lot of content for that. So let's go through the content first. So this woman, she, according to the two-process model, associates the loud bang with the balloon. Now the two-process model, the two processes it's talking about, and I think this is what's tripped people up, is they can't remember what the two-process model actually is. So this is simply just our two different types of conditioning. So this is classical conditioning and operant. Okay. The classical conditioning is the first process that happens, and this is how you gain the phobia. And operant conditioning is how it's maintained. Those are the two processes that occur. So let's go through the classical conditioning. Because first off, you would say that the phobia has been gained through classical conditioning, and then you'd explain it. I'm going to draw it as a diagram, but for this question, particularly because it's an 8 marker, we are needing to say this in prose, in paragraphs. So as you're reading through, think, how would you write this in the form of a paragraph? So, during classical conditioning, an unconditioned stimulus initially causes an unconditioned response. In this case of our young woman, the UCS is the loud bang, and the UCR is fear. So naturally, she's scared of loud bangs. Also naturally, we have a neutral stimulus, in this case the balloon, causing no response. So this all occurs before conditioning. That's what happens there. Then during conditioning, our unconditioned stimulus is associated, and that's a key word, you need to use that term, associated. The unconditioned stimulus is associated with the neutral stimulus, which still causes an unconditioned response because it hasn't been learnt yet. And again, in this case, the UCS is the bang, the neutral stimulus is the balloon, and the unconditioned response is fear. So this is during the conditioning. After conditioning, eventually the neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus. So in this case that's the balloon, and that causes a conditioned response of fear. and this is after. So that's actually quite a lot to talk about in terms of your description. So you'd say that the phobia is gained through association, and then you talk through this. However, before the association happens, we've got an unconditioned stimulus of the loud bang causing an unconditioned response of fear, and the neutral stimulus of a balloon causing no response. Whilst the young woman, as you can see here, let's start signposting and showing that we can apply. Whilst the young woman was at a party, the unconditioned stimulus of the bang was paired with a neutral stimulus of the balloon, causing the unconditioned response of fear. And then the reason why this has happened is because that association has happened, so the conditioned stimulus of the balloon ends up causing a conditioned response of fear. So that's how they gain the phobia. So that's how she's gained the phobia. And I'm going to get marks here, both for my description and my application, because I've described what's happening and I've also applied it to the woman. Operant conditioning is how this woman has maintained it. So you can see here, even after all these years, and I would talk about that in my answer, I would probably lift that up and say this has been maintained through operant conditioning. You can see this from the case of the young woman, because even after all these years, she cannot go into a room where there are balloons. So this is maintained through operant conditioning. So if we have a look, she has left the room whenever she has seen a balloon, and she has been negatively reinforced for this. Okay, because that negative stimulus got taken away when she left the room. So every time she leaves the room, she feels good. She gets a reward for that one, her feeling good, and so she keeps doing it. So that is the operant conditioning. And you would have to talk about negative reinforcement. You'd have to mention that happening. And again, applying it to her. So it's this bit here. So she feels terrified, she leaves the room, and then she'll feel better, and that's a negative reinforcement. Now remember that we also have to evaluate it, because it says discuss. And whenever I see discuss, I need to think, this is asking me to describe and evaluate. So let's have a think about that one. So first off, let's say a good thing about the two-process model. And I would literally start off my paragraph saying a strength of the two-process model is, or even a strength of the two-process model explanation of phobias is. What I'm doing is I am taking the question and using these words throughout my answer, so that I can prove to my examiner that I know that I'm answering this question and I know that I'm answering it properly, and I'm signposting to them. So a strength of the two-process model is, let's say it's backed up with research. So there is research, such as, say, Su et al., that says that people can recall a specific event. So there's research into specific events causing that phobia. So, for example, Su et al. Found that agoraphobics are most likely to explain their phobia in terms of a specific event. Okay, so there's my point. Here is my explanation. So my explanation is Su et al. Remember, you can say a psychologist or psychologist found. So agoraphobics, you can explain it, they've had a specific event. So what does this mean? I'm linking it back. This means that In this sense, this means that classical conditioning can be used in trying to explain how phobias have developed. Let's say that one. But then I can further talk about this one. One limitation. So again, I can talk about. I could even use a however. However, one limitation. Again, I'm going to say one limitation of the two-process model explanation of phobias. Again, I'm saying to my examiner, look, I'm answering the question. With one limitation of blah, 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 is that it doesn't explain all phobias. So that, again, is my point. My evidence could be there are some people can't remember a specific event. Okay. For this one, I can put in a counter argument. So I can then say that it's possible that traumatic event did happen, but they've just forgotten. And there's a researcher called Ost who said that. So he said that it is possible that a phobic had a traumatic event, but then they forgot that. They forgot the traumatic event from happening, but they're still left with that phobia. And then I can link back. This means that. And here I can talk about how, although it could potentially explain some phobias, it's not going to be able to explain all phobias. Okay, if I do this, I'm actually talking about the same sort of point, but looking at it from different angles. I've got research into specific events, such as Su et al. However, not all phobics remember a specific event. But Ost said that they might just simply have forgotten that event. So that's looking at actually one whole evaluation point. But I've got a burger paragraph and a double whopper paragraph. Because I've got my point explanation link, point explanation counter argument link. So actually, if we look at that as a whole, and I'll try and bring the camera out a bit, you can see that there's loads that you would have to talk about in this answer. I know, if it was me, that if I just started writing my answer for this, I would not get a very good answer. I would have to plan this out. You need to plan these out as well. Okay, now I know this has taken me, how long are we on? This has taken me about 15 minutes to do. But I've been explaining it all. And genuinely, in my A-level exams and in my degree, before you see an essay like that, you would have seen something like this in my notes. This would be my plan. You can see I've got my description here with bits of application, and then I've got my two evaluation paragraphs named there. And once this has happened, I can just write. I know exactly what I'm writing once I've planned this out. So what I would like you to do, if you weren't very strong on this question, can you please now produce your own plan for this question? What would you talk about? Do it more detailed than what I've done here, so spend some time doing it, but remember to use your green pen, and you can use extra sheets if you wish, but try and come up with something like this that you can see on the screen now.